Chapter 7. Marg. 1,000 years ago, 20 years before Shodan. The screaming was unbearable. The thick stone walls of House Zorm seemed to tremble beneath it. "Make it stop, Mama. Please, make it stop." On the cold floor lay a woman in a simple cotton dress. Her face was covered in sweat and scratches, her lips were bloodied, and her eyes had rolled back into their sockets. Her fingers were twisted, her jaw clenched tightly shut. 2 people held her arms, and 2 others held her legs, otherwise she would continue to harm herself. Her hands would keep clawing towards her own face, and her legs would keep kicking until they broke. "Save me!" she screamed. "Save me!" And so it had been for almost an hour. "Make this stop! Oh, please, make this stop!" Shirin Zorm held her daughter's right arm firmly and looked desperately towards her husband. "Mani, we cannot stop this, Shirin," he said quietly. "She has to endure it." Shirin sobbed. "Oh, why, my darling?" She leaned closer to her daughter. "We are here. Hold on. It will pass. Truly, it will be all right." It did pass. But it was not all right. 10 minutes later, Sepideh stopped breathing. No matter what her parents did, no matter what the healers attempted, not a single breath of life returned to her lungs. Sepideh had left this world at the age of 22. The Gozar is not meant to be like this. 2 days after the terrible loss of Sepideh, the heads of the houses gathered in Ramasti, the capital of Tehran. They sat within the house of Ava, where ancient stone walls had listened to the voices of their ancestors for centuries. "Our children are dying." Shirin looked around the room. "It is this world, Shirin," one of them said. "There is not enough magic here. The emotions are too raw, unfiltered. There is no way for our powers to fully develop." "But it was possible," Shirin replied fiercely. "We have succeeded for hundreds of years since our arrival here. What has changed? Did we not choose carefully? Did we not make this decision with caution?" She looked around the circle. This world was suitable. It has magic, earthly magic, witches, even some mages and creatures with extraordinary abilities. It is barely enough. Nilufar stepped forward. The magic was never enough, and it will continue to fade. Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "With every generation, we move further away from the Fae who were born in the forests of Deltangi, the Fae who bathed beneath the sunlight of Garma." She allowed the silence to linger. "That is what our bodies require, what our souls crave. We cannot survive the Gozar without nourishment." "What are you suggesting, Nilufar Zelvera?" Behnam Brigant looked at her sharply. "That we cross the Daria? That we undertake the Shodan? The great departure?" He slowly shook his head. "You know what waits in the darkness. Who says there is still a home waiting for us there? We did not leave without reason." Silence followed. Then Bar, the witch who had remained quiet until that moment, stepped forward. "You asked me to attend this gathering. My sisters and I have watched this happen among your kind for almost 20 years. Her voice remained steady. "At first rarely, then occasionally, and now," she looked at the faces surrounding her, "we believe the chance of a successful transition will eventually become almost impossible." She folded her hands in front of her. "At the request of House Zelvera and House Brigant, we searched for a solution." A brief pause. "I have found 3. Another silence. "And none of them will satisfy you." She looked towards Behnam. "Yes, Behnam, Shodan is one of them." The room fell completely silent. "The departure, the return to Deltangi." She looked across the gathered houses. "I do not know what brought you here, but you cannot truly take root in this world, not like this." "And what are the other options?" Milad Fazir looked at Bar with disapproval. "The second option," Bar said calmly, "is to remain, to hope that your children survive the Gozar." Her gaze moved across the room. "But I do not recommend it. That is not a real choice." Mani Zorm stared at her angrily. "What is the third?" Bar turned towards the woman beside her. "Sister, come forward." Slowly, another witch stepped forward. In her hands, she carried a heavy stone jar with a lid. Carefully, she placed it on the table in the center of the room. "Lord Ava was kind enough to assist us in creating this elixir," Bar said. She looked towards Navid Ava. "As you know, his daughter recently endured the Gozar. His son did so 2 years before her." She placed her hand upon the jar. We asked ourselves why hundreds of Fae have fallen during the transition in recent years, while House Ava appears to have passed through this period almost unharmed. Yes, Milad said, leaning forward. I would like to know that as well. His gaze moved sharply towards Naveed. Perhaps you would explain it yourself. Naveed Ava cleared his throat. Every Fae possesses a gift in which they excel. That is not an achievement, it is inherited. He looked towards Milad. You, Milad Fazir, and your family have always been deeply connected to nature, to trees, plants, and the earth itself. Then his gaze moved towards Lale Agathos. Just as the talents of House Agathos lie in the mastery of the mind, their own, and that of others. Lale cleared her throat. Where are you going with this, Naveed? Naveed looked at her. House Ava controls emotions. We sense them, we can strengthen them, we can influence them, we can silence them. His eyes moved towards the stone jar on the table. The Gozar was once a transition of withdrawal, followed by a return stronger than before, a period in which our magic reshaped itself. His voice softened. But this world weakens us. During the Gozar, our minds close themselves away. Our emotions fade into the background. Our empathy becomes almost impossible. He paused. Here too the Fae withdraw. But when the time comes to bloom once more, the inner barrier breaks. His gaze moved across the room. All the emotions that have been locked away return at once, raw, unfiltered. Naveed's voice lowered. It drives us mad. Silence filled the room. We suffer from the Gozar within our family as well. But we can control it. Ba took the word again. House Ava has found a way to reduce the negative effects of the Gozar to a minimum. She looked at Naveed. When he noticed that his son was slowly becoming emotionally numb, he intervened. He temporarily closed him off from the outside world and trained him, guided him. Nilafar gave a short laugh without humor. Wonderful, Ba. Truly wonderful for Naveed and his family. She looked around the room. And what about us? Ba looked at them all. What if the Gozar no longer has to happen? The words lingered in the air. What if your children never have to endure the transition again? Then we will live shorter lives. Lala looked at her in disbelief. Our powers will never reach their full potential. She shook her head. Then you will become like humans. Ba spoke softly, almost with pity, but with more magic flowing through your veins. She allowed the words to settle. No showdown, no terrible deaths for your children, no fear for every generation that follows. A silence fell. You will likely still live to around 150 years. You will retain your abilities, but they will never become what they once were. Ba ran her hand over the stone jar. The withdrawal is a necessary part of the Gozar, but with Lord Ava's blood, a great number of additional ingredients, and our magic, we have created an elixir that can suppress the Gozar. She looked around the gathering. For hundreds of years, certainly, perhaps even 1,000. How do we know it works? Lala looked sharply at Ba. My daughter has taken it. Every eye turned towards Darius Vandet. It was Yasmin's own choice. She is now 24 years old, and she has still not experienced the transition. Darius Vandet looked calmly at the gathered houses. I will eventually choose Shodan. His voice was quiet. I do not wish to watch my children die, to outlive them in the end. He lowered his gaze. But I would not wish any parent to have to make the choice of taking their children with them into Shodan. Ba remained silent. What could have happened to make an entire people consider giving up a part of their own identity, their long lives, their full power? She cleared her throat. The elixir is for all of you, and it will affect all of your descendants. She looked towards Darius. No one descended from Yasmin Vandet will, presumably for almost 1,000 years, experience the Gozar. She looked back towards the gathered houses. The choice is yours. Shodan. Golna Salvoria's voice echoed through the hall. We are Fae. She lifted her chin. We did not cross the Daria to end up here as a lesser version of ourselves. Slowly, others began to nod. A murmur of agreement spread throughout the room. And so it came to pass. In the years that followed, 7632 of the more than 8,000 families chose Shodan, and they were never seen again. Another 2,000 believed they would survive the Gozar, and remained, without the elixir, but almost none of their children reached the age of 24. In the years that followed, many of these families eventually gave the elixir to their children or chose Shodan instead. 250 years ago, The last fee outside the bloodline of House Ava to endure the Gozar died at the age of 23, claimed by the very transition their ancestors had hoped they could survive. Several years had passed since the devastating death of Sepideh. It was spring in Romasti. Navid climbed the steps of the Pantheon. The air carried the scent of flowers and new life. Nature had never seemed more beautiful. Was this Milad Fazir's doing, he wondered? Had he, as a farewell to his children, placed his hands upon the earth one final time and sung to Ma for a greener world? Brother, Darius Vandet nodded towards Navid with a kind expression. Are you ready to gather one final time? All the houses who had chosen to remain and give the elixir to their children came together, the elixir that would later be called Marg, the word for death, a name many considered fitting, because in a way it was also a farewell to their lives as fee. It was decided that the drinking of Marg would no longer be spoken of, for if they did, the generations that followed would yearn for the almost immortal lives and the full strength their ancestors had once possessed. They would seek to reverse the effects of Marg, never knowing the true cost of facing the Gozar once more. Ba had predicted it. The truth would be buried. But secrets of such magnitude were never easy to erase. Among the Fee, where generations could span centuries, whispers remained. And it would take hundreds of years before the true purpose of Marg faded into legend. There was also shame among many of them for what they had chosen to do to their children. Not everyone was as open and honest as Darius had been with his daughter Yasmin. Not everyone gave their children a choice. Some secretly mixed the elixir into their food or drink. An explanation was passed down through the generations. The bloodlines had simply grown too weak to endure the transition. The Gozar, they claimed, only came to those born with exceptional strength. Only the most powerful Fae were destined to face it. The older Fae, those who still carried enough of the blood of their ancestors, those born in the forests of Deltangi, departed in the years that followed. One by one, they crossed the Daria. But there was one other house, House Ava. Their children would not drink Marg. Their children would not cross the Daria, unless they had lived long lives and felt that their time had come. They would remain Fae, as they had always been. And every generation that followed would once again attempt to endure the Gozar. Someone had to preserve the secret. Someone had to stand ready when the Gozar returned. Who better than House Ava? And so it was decided that one house would stand above all others. Navid Ava became the first king of the Fae, and not long afterwards the first king of all Terran.